Stanford University.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Tia Rich, and I direct the Contemplation by Design program here at Stanford University. Today's session, Inner Transformation and Sustainability, will be provided by Professor Christine Wamsler. Dr. Wamsler is an internationally renowned expert in sustainable development and associated inner and outer transformation processes with more than 20 years of experience. Her work has shaped international debates and increased knowledge on personal, organizational, and policy transformations in a context of climate change. She has led many international projects and published about 200 academic papers, book chapters, and books on these issues. Her publications are regularly cited and used for practice, theory, and policy development, including by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. Let's give a warm welcome to Christine Wamsler. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. It's a pleasure to be here. Okay. I would like to start this morning session with a personal story. As a child, I grew up with strong feelings, deep feelings of who I am and what is important in life. I felt one with the world. Living and caring was one. As I became older, culture took over. The stories I heard began to color my life. I went to school. I learned that adults and experts know, not children. I learned that knowledge is external, not internal. Kicked out of the world of wonders and wisdom, I started filling up my brain with knowledge to find a new place in the world. I went to academia, learned that the truth is complicated, learned to express myself in complicated ways. Over time, I started to not understand myself anymore, hiding myself under layers and layers of othering to feel protected. At one point, my heart and body became rebellious. My voice refused to repeat other stories. My thoughts refused to ignore my feelings. Feelings of partiality, imperfection, of separation. I lost my voice. It's when I saw the separation in the world, consumerism, injustice, climate change. It's me, it's us, it's one story. Searching for new voice is scary. It makes me shiver. And there's a strong headwind out there. But if you understand my silence, you may understand my words. With silence, you may hear my call. Thanks for listening. So, during the next 25 minutes, I will examine the issue of inner transformation from the perspective of sustainability. I will begin by reviewing what we currently know about the issue of inner transformation for sustainability. And secondly, I will look into what is needed to move forward towards sustainability and to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. What we do know is that over the past few years, the issue of inner transformation has been receiving increasing, if not exponential, attention in the context of sustainability. At the same time, there is a clear gap between the work of professionals, including scholars, practitioners, and educators, who focus on sustainability on the one hand and on inner transformation or personal development on the other hand. This is hampering progress. To address this gap, instead of viewing and framing sustainability challenges such as climate change as purely technical external problems, we should understand them as relationship problems. This change in understanding is necessary as it broadens the scope of current approaches to sustainability. More specifically, it allows us to apply and integrate existing knowledge from different fields of expertise. At the same time, it allows for deep analysis in order to find new ways to tap in our human potential to care, commit to, and effect change towards sustainability. Let me give you some background to explain and reinforce these 4 key messages. One of the main reasons why inner dimensions and inner transformation have been receiving increasing attention in the context of sustainability relates to the fact that our dominant approaches do not seem to be sufficient. In fact, current trajectories remain deeply unsustainable. As a result, today's society is characterized by increasingly complex sustainability challenges, such as climate change and its impacts on ecosystems, biodiversity, food, energy, water, and human health. We know that without additional efforts and measures, there will be irreversible impacts globally. It's clear that our dominant sustainability approaches have not catalyzed the necessary change. And this is despite the prominence of sustainability as a concept and the associated goals and targets that have been set since the 1980s. One reason for this situation is that the vast majority of sustainability scholarship, education, and practice has so far only focused on the external world, ecosystems, wider socioeconomic structures, and technology. This situation relates to the fact that a lot of this work originated in the biophysical discourse, which framed climate change as a technical problem. This means that a second aspect of reality has been vastly neglected in sustainability and climate work: individuals with their inner lives and inner qualities. This gap has been increasingly underlined by a diversity of leaders and scholars, such as Gustav Speth, former chair of the United Nations Development Group, who once said, "I used to think that the top environment problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." In response to such insights, the concepts of inner dimensions and inner transformation have been receiving growing attention in sustainability and climate work. Here, inner dimensions refer to people's mindsets, including their beliefs, values, worldviews, and associated inner qualities, which involves cognitive, emotional, and relational capacities. And inner transformation can then simply be understood as the powerful unleashing of human inner potential to care, commit to, and effect change for a better life. It thus describes changes in the sphere of human inner dimensions and involves a change in people's consciousness. This change in consciousness refers to the lens through which we see and relate to ourselves and the world around us, others, nature, and future generations. So this relationship is crucial because we know today that climate change and other sustainability challenges are in fact internal human crises. They are the result of the human story of separation or disconnection, which assumes that we are all separate from each other, that some humans are superior to others, and that we are separate and superior to the rest of the natural world. Treating the environment as a resource for the benefit of humankind and as an end for our economy has led to its abuse and destruction. Several theories underlie the understanding and analysis of inner transformation in the context of sustainability. What they have in common is that they all show that systemic change and personal transformation are deeply interconnected, and that addressing mindsets might hold the most potential for transforming systems, for supporting sustainability. Many of these theories are based on the so-called iceberg model, which is illustrated here. In simple terms, the iceberg model says that what we can see, the part of the iceberg that is visible above the surface of the sea, are the events or crises that define our world today. But much more, around 90% of the iceberg, is invisible to us. Now, in human terms, what is hidden beneath the surface are the underlying patterns, structures, and mindsets that are responsible for creating the events or crises that define our world today. Now, based on this model, we can see that the capacity to address and reflect on our own mindsets and potentially adopt new paradigms is one of the most powerful ways to dramatically influence sustainability outcomes. We call this a deep leverage point for change. The iceberg model also indicates that we can work at different levels towards sustainability, at the level of behavior, at the level of systems or structural change, and at the level of cultural change and how we make meaning regarding the world around us, our consciousness or mindsets. This idea is also expressed in integral theory. Integral theory argues that when we are working on change, we can draw on 4 areas: behavior change, systems change, cultural change, and psychological dimensions which relate to changes in our consciousness. Importantly, it also implies that if we choose to work on one of these 4 areas to the exclusion of the others, we might not see the kind of change that we are hoping for. The 3 spheres of transformation framework is another expression of these principles. It was developed for the context of sustainability, and it builds upon the understanding that most of the climate and sustainability work that is being done today relates to what is called the practical sphere. This is where the goals to meet climate change and other sustainability challenges are generally located, and where measurable effects can be seen, for example, behavioral and technical responses. Other measures address the political sphere, which relates to the systems and structures we create and use to organize society. But if we take the example of climate change, we see that it has taken us decades to put in place a voluntary agreement on limiting global warming to 2 degrees. And as I've already highlighted, this is because we tend to forget about the inner or personal sphere, that is the individual and shared beliefs, values, worldviews, and associated inequalities that influence how we see the system, how we see ourselves in relation to the system, to others, those who are leading change, and future generations. In line with this understanding, this framework here shows that personal and planetary well-being are in fact intrinsically interrelated. It highlights some of the key links between inner transformation and sustainability that form our relationship to ourselves, others, and the world. Examples are behavioral regulation, or the activation of core values, and relational qualities such as compassion and human nature connection, which are key in creating what we here in this framework call the individual to global sustainability continuum. Adult development theory adds to this understanding because it shows how our mindsets change and develop over time and throughout our lives. Importantly, every development stage then represents a significant shift in how we experience ourselves, others, and the world. And this shift in our self and other awareness, thinking patterns, and our sense of inclusivity has clear implications for sustainability and climate change work. It's not surprising then that the definition of adult development is very similar to the definition of inner transformation to sustainability, which I presented earlier. The unfolding of human potential towards deeper understanding, wisdom, and effectiveness in the world. Adult development theory also suggests that we can develop certain inner qualities that help us to tap into this potential, to grow and engage with the world. This idea also underlies the concept of transformative qualities or transformative capacities. In recent decades, various competency frameworks have emerged to support sustainable development. However, it is only recently that they also have recognized the importance of inner qualities. One example of such a framework are these 5 clusters of transformative qualities that relate to people's sense of awareness, connection, insight, purpose, and agency. The identification of these 5 clusters and the associated qualities was based on a large-scale empirical study of the International Climate Conference, COP25, as well as a review of existing research on inner-outer transformation, which we recently published. These 5 clusters include qualities such as self-awareness and reflection, compassion, perspective seeking, intrinsic value orientation, hope, and courage. And they relate to habits that I have listed here to the right and that are crucial in achieving the sustainable development goals, such as open-minded, servant, relational, integral, hopeful, equitable, and action-oriented attitudes. As this model suggests, transformative qualities and associated intermediary factors relate then to certain values, worldviews, and beliefs that delineate our connections or relationships with ourselves, others, and nature. These influence then in turn the 3 dimensions of agency at individual and collective level, interbeing, interthinking, and interacting. This model here also indicates that there are 2 powerful ways to support such change. And I will elaborate on both of these approaches later in my presentation when I will talk about the work of the Contemplative Sustainable Futures Program. Here, I only want to note that the so-called the review process, which some of you might be familiar with, is an example for the first type of approach to support change. So what is missing and what is needed to move forward? It is clear that despite the existing theories and research into inner dimensions, inner transformation, and personal development practices, their application to sustainability work is in its early stages. This is hampering current progress. And it is therefore essential to bridge the gap between what I call the sustainability and consciousness communities, or in other words, between work that focuses on sustainability on the one hand and inner transformation or personal development on the other hand. As we have seen, sustainability professionals tend to focus on ecosystems, wider socioeconomic structures, and technology. For some, the issue of inner transformation is even considered as non-scientific, private, or esoteric. As for the consciousness community, here the focus is on issues such as personal or adult development, health, well-being, and self-leadership. In this context, sustainability is mainly related to the personal level, and the community rarely links their work to wider societal or systemic issues. In order to bridge this gap and move forward, I believe that we urgently need a paradigm shift. We must stop addressing climate change as a purely technological external problem, and rather we have to frame it as a relationship problem, which is intrinsically linked to other societal crises such as health or poverty, and their associated root causes such as consumerism and racism. This change in our standing is key as it allows us to broaden the scope. It supports the integration of existing approaches and knowledge on how people relate to themselves, others, nature, and future generations into the sustainability field. As we have seen, these aspects are currently hardly considered in predominant climate change models or approaches, but they are crucial in changing the narrative of separation that underlies the climate crisis. Understanding the climate crisis and other sustainability challenges as relational also opens up space for deeper analysis in order to improve our current knowledge. This is an important point, as we cannot assume that personal development interventions will automatically translate into sustainability, climate action, and justice. Instead, we must explore if and how related approaches can best be mainstream and oriented towards sustainability. Ultimately, this is a precondition for linking inner and outer transformation and being able to identify what we can call inner sustainability goals or inner sustainable development goals. In other words, the inner qualities, approaches, and conditions that we need to create to effect change towards sustainability. Accordingly, in the context of the Contemplative Sustainable Futures program, we explore two powerful ways to link inner transformation and sustainability. On the one hand, we look into how we can best support and develop learning environments and practices that help us discover our individual thinking and internalize cultural patterns and increase our sense of purpose and interconnection. This can help us to let go of habits that are an expression of the cultural narrative of separation and understand well-being and sustainability as qualities we can nurture. It can thus help us to tap into our full potential for addressing climate change. Examples are, for instance, our cooperation with the Inner Green Deal Initiative, which is a climate leadership development program for staff at the European Commission and other decision makers, as well as our work with the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies to design and evaluate transformative spaces at the annual international climate conferences. Importantly, this work is not about saying we need to change people's beliefs, values, and worldviews, as this turns them into objects to be changed, rather than seeing them as change agents. Instead, it's about creating spaces and conditions that can nurture a culture of inner growth, mutual support, and engagement from a place of shared universal values and connection. On the other hand, we look into how we can best integrate inner dimensions into the current political and institutional landscape. And the aim is here to systematically mainstream inner dimensions into existing systems, thus creating the structural conditions that could support the emergence of a new, more sustainable narrative. Now, to do so, we need to systematically revise organizations' communication, project management structures and tools, along with their policies, regulations, and resource allocation. Examples from our program are our cooperation with the Mindshift project to co-create the so-called Inner Development Goals framework, as well as the Activate Change project that we run together with the Mindfulness Initiative. The aim of the Activate Change project is to identify how the intersection of mind and climate change can be better integrated into policymaking and the role that mindfulness and compassion can play in this regard. What we find is that the relationship between mind and climate is not only intertwined, in fact, it also creates vicious cycles that degrade personal and planetary well-being. At the same time, in climate policy, such considerations are as yet largely absent. It is therefore absolutely crucial to find better ways to ensure the systematic consideration of aspects of mind in climate policy and action in order to move from vicious to virtuous cycles of mind and climate change and ultimately improve both personal and planetary well-being. Now, independent of the actual context and focus of our projects, be it the creation of new learning environments and practices on the one hand, like the Inner Green Deal and the Beyond program, or addressing institutional policy change through mainstreaming on the other hand, in all cases, we look into how knowledge coming from contemplative science, neuroscience, psychology, and sustainability science can be best combined to nourish our human potential to care and commit to affecting change across scales. The ultimate goal is working together to create a new narrative, a new sustainability story. And since I seem to have some time left, I would like to end then with this quote from Albert Einstein. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection to a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your enriching presentation that helped me feel nourished in mind, body, and spirit. Your visuals with your depth of data and science was an example of the message that you're offering to the world. As you began this presentation with your personal story, one question that's come forward is, how have you experienced the personal stories among the leaders that you are interacting with, as was summarized in your Contemplative Sustainable Future slide, where you listed several organizations and intervention projects? Has there been any storytelling to help people connect with their own lost sense of wonder as a child? And you mentioned, I think the phrase was the wisdom and wonder of childhood. And just to speak to whether that process that you so authentically shared has been part of your process with these leaders.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I guess that what your question reminds me about the many interviews that I recently conducted with a lot of politicians and policymakers around the world, and that was for the Activate Change project, where I asked them about how they see the connection between mind and climate change, and how they see what types of inequalities that they find as key for supporting climate resilience and responsiveness. And I found it actually very surprising how many could share personal stories. And I asked them to share personal stories. What I found interesting is that many of these stories actually, there was a kind of trigger. And for many, that trigger was actually COVID. and the pandemic that we went through, where they started to reconnect with nature and start to explore themselves really in a new way. And there were many who really started to go on a different path and shared stories with me. Others shared stories which were very much related to the increase in climate anxiety around the world. And for me, that was also very powerful, because actually the people I talked to, rather coming from my generation, they could see and observe the increasing climate anxiety in the younger generations without actually feeling personally connected to these type of emotions. But still then, because of the increase of climate anxiety in the population, that is really something they cannot really ignore anymore in politics, also created a kind of wake-up call, a kind of entry door to the whole topic of inner transformation, sustainability. It might only be like one little part of the story, but it's an important entry point. And I also talked to parliamentarians, actually, of the younger generation. I talked with the youngest parliamentarian of the European Commission, that was. And she, in contrast to all the older politicians and policymakers, she had experienced that climate anxiety at a very deep personal level. And for her, it was actually a reason to go into politics. So yeah, many stories I think that one can find and that are really powerful when looking into that field.
Thank you for that illumination of how people were forthcoming with their stories in the context of your research. Your research that was just published based on the work on COP25, I wanted, if people are asking whether there is any plan for COP26 next week to offer any inner transformation opportunities. And if you, I know you've done so much hard work and I can hardly fathom how you've achieved all the studies you've done, but we have questions about whether you have any curriculum or intervention studies designed that might be launched in COP26.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for the question. We are actually, we have regular meetings right now about that. It turned out to be quite challenging to integrate the topic of inner change, inner transformation, and sustainability in the current COP. But yes, we do offer again transformative space. But this time it's conducted a bit differently. So it's the same organizations who were involved last time and that I mentioned on my slide in relation to the transformative space. It's the same organizations who again have engaged in creating a new space, a new transformative space, but this time it will look slightly differently because we actually invited other organizations to join us in this transformative space. So there were only general guidelines as to how to, regarding our wish to what kind of transformative space we would like to see. And within that framework, we invited different organizations actually to come and use the space for different sessions. And the reason for that was, first of all, that we find it absolutely crucial to cooperate with others who are interested in creating new ways for communicating and collaborating. And that was a good way to link with these other organizations and to create a discussion around these aspects. And secondly, this time we would like to look more into the different types of methods and approaches and processes that are crucial to create a transformative space and that can support people in basically that help to nourish transformative qualities. So both the process of creating a transformative space, but also the kind of methods that help to support transformative qualities. So we would like to look more into what methods are used and what processes are used. We also actually have a publication on that, but that's really, it was just an entry point to look deeper into that. So we would like to look into that more deeply and together with others.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing. One other question is, as we've seen in other areas where transformative mind shifts are needed, that it can be hard to reach the person who would transform the most. And therefore, there's interest in how you recruit and communicate this inner transformation opportunity and space at the COP sessions.
Yeah, I think one important point is that the idea really behind the discussion about inner transformation and sustainability is really not to go out with the aim to change other people's beliefs, mindsets, and values, but rather, as I mentioned before, create a space for self-reflection and inquiry to nurture transformative qualities without a set agenda. And I think it's also important to know that, you know, it's rather seen as people, as agents of change. We are all agents of change. We all matter more than we think. It's not only about a specific politician or policymakers. I think it's an important aspect in this work to communicate the importance that we all matter, that we are all agents of change. And in complexity, in aspects of, like, when it's about complex issues such as climate change, solutions at the end really are emergent. So we cannot really, it's not a cause-effect relationship. It's rather to create space and opportunities and conditions for emergence.
Thank you for that very inspiring answer. Another question that came in is, what can I tangibly do to transform internally and to support inner transformation by others who are involved in sustainability-focused nonprofits with which I am involved?
Yeah, there are really many different approaches to work on our inner qualities, and I don't think that there's one method or approach that works for everybody. I think everybody needs to experience a little bit what works best for oneself. Obviously, some people engage a lot, like, for instance, in the Beyond course, this is related to mindfulness and compassion training. That's just one approach. I'm not saying that that's the only approach that exists. There are other, like, tools and frameworks, like from Monica Sharma, which is frameworks and tools for transformative leadership that also can be applied in different settings. And while there are, I mentioned work that reconnects, other kind of practices. There are many different kind of approaches and practices out there that can be combined in different ways. So at a personal level, I think one has to explore a bit for oneself what works best to find stillness, to give oneself time to be able to self-reflect, become present, become more compassionate with oneself, others, and nature. When it comes to inner transformation within an organization, and in relation to colleagues one works with, I think it's very powerful, obviously, to connect to existing networks and communities that are out there that work on inner transformation and sustainability as a kind of community of practice to nurture and support each other, because it can sometimes be very challenging to work in that field. And I guess my personal story at the beginning has shown that it's not necessarily an easy way to go. So I guess it's important to have the support and be connected with certain communities of practice within that field. And then there are very tiny small things within an organization, obviously, that can make a huge difference, just changing how we communicate, how we hold meetings, how we write emails, connecting to our inner values, bring our inner values, universal values to the table, make them explicit, allow others to share and reflect on them, and create opportunities for reflection, I think is really important, apart from these other aspects that I mentioned before, which is about really mainstreaming, systematically integrating the consideration of the inner, also in regulations and project management tools, logical framework approaches. We can basically revise every single thing we use on a daily basis, reconsidering how we can integrate the consideration of the inner into these existing tools and approaches.
Thank you. In your description of the offerings at the COP meeting, you used the word space, and there's a request for clarification if that is metaphorical use, meaning the quality of dialogue and concepts, or if there's a physical space, a room, a location where people are invited to take a contemplative pause.
Yeah, very good question. It's both. So yes, there is a physical space, and obviously it's also meant to create transformative space. I guess I have not really thought so much about the term. Actually, it's not me who has created it, but I guess there are many levels to it, because I also deeply believe that the space that we manage to create in our own mind, really through stillness, for instance, is when we manage to find our purpose. It's where wisdom emerges. So I think there are many layers of understanding this term. So thanks for asking.
Yes, thank you. And our final question has to do with the circular economy. How can we ensure the circular economy advocates and supporters take into account inner transformation as the human element of the puzzle that are missing?
Yeah, I guess it's not different to any other approach to sustainability. I guess what is helpful when it's about people working in the field, to actually get to know the frameworks that I presented, to get an understanding that there are actually frameworks that have this inner aspect as part of it. And I think what is crucial, I guess one can quite easily get resistance if you present the topic as an either or. But it's what I'm saying has nothing to do with either or. So what I'm supporting is a both and approach, where we can work on, for instance, these 4 different quadrants at the same time. It's not saying that one or the other quadrant is more important, but it's saying that if we do not consider them all, we will not see the change that we would like to see. And I guess that's the same answer for that particular case of the circular economy, to just bring that in.
Thank you very much for the work you're doing and for the rich resources that you offer at your website. Let's give a warm thank you and gratitude and support to your well-being to Dr. Wamsler. Thank you.
Thank you so much.